his stepfather for almost half of his life at that point. This was a young man that actually had the wherewithal to disclose to the Philadelphia Department of Human Services at the time he was 9 years of age that there was some abuse being perpetrated on him. And yet, because, as we know is not surprising, his mother took the side of the offender, and what may have been a less than enthusiastic investigation by the Department of Human Services was chalked up to inappropriate sexual education. Nevertheless, this now young man was thrust back into the home, and the abuse continued and, in fact, got worse. And it wasn't until recently, and then as it turns out, March of last year, that we went to trial on this matter. And the case obviously was simply this now young man's word against his stepfather. And the strength of character with which he took the witness stand, confronted his abuser, someone that had gained the power and control over him for so long, and for this young man to recount not just one or two incidents, but a lifetime, really, of abuse, was simply compelling and powerful, and obviously carried the day and resulted in the rightful criminal conviction of this man. Now, there's another case, though, that also speaks to similar examples, one that I prosecuted last summer involving a firefighter from the city of Philadelphia. This firefighter had used his position as a respected member of our society to gain the trust of a family of 8 that had a dysfunctional mother and father relationship, so much so that the father was essentially out of the house completely. And he took essentially 3 brothers under his wing and began a period of molestation from the mid-1970s all the way through mid-1990s. Remarkably, none of this was disclosed by any of the brothers to even each other until early 2000. And it was only when the youngest of these 3 brothers had relationship problems and at the urging of a spouse gone to seek some counseling that he began to talk about this abuse, and then spoke to his brothers about it, and lo and behold, they had disclosed their abuse as well. And I want to stress that these were 3 brothers. They had older brothers that firmly, we believe, were probably abused as well, one of whom committed suicide on a heroin overdose when he was 18, some years prior. That this man had manipulated the situation in such a way and gained their trust to such a degree that they couldn't even tell each other and didn't even know about it, that it was occurring. So to finish up, and in summary, giving more victims of childhood sexual abuse access to the justice system and simply the chance to have their day in court is really little for them to ask of us as a society. Expanding the age at which the statute of limitations commences will serve as an example to society as a whole that the criminal justice system will work to achieve justice no matter how long it may be delayed. That the system will hold the perpetrators of childhood sexual abuse accountable for their actions, and that the system will work to ensure that the victims of that abuse have their faith in us as a society restored. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to thank you as well as the other witnesses who have really prepared very well for this hearing and given us a great deal to think about. But the one thing, Judge Abraham, if I might ask you, that maybe I missed it when you talked about the Pennsylvania legislature enacting longer statutes of limitations for criminal cases. Have they enacted a window of opportunity?
They have not. They have not enacted a civil window. There is another bill. Interestingly enough, as a result of my grand jury investigation, the civil window was introduced, and it was opposed and defeated. After the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference of Bishops just was all over the legislature and spent an inordinate amount of time and money to try to defeat it. There are other groups who are also interested in trying to defeat it for a variety of reasons, most of them, but not all of them, religious. However, one of the staunchest opponents of the civil window is now the prime sponsor of a civil window statute. Also Roman Catholic, although, you know, it's not just Roman Catholics. I
Right.
mean, as a judge, as a prosecutor, and as an assistant prosecutor, I've seen untold numbers of thousands of cases of sexual abuse of all kinds. I just concentrated on the grand jury because I think it was so stunning. Something that was incomprehensible to me could have even existed. I heard about it elsewhere. I just couldn't believe that it could happen in Philadelphia with the cardinals I had known and whose churches I had been to, and essentially when I was so young, brought up in the church. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't deal with it. And I said, this can't be true, but it was true. So the civil window will not just affect clergy of any kind. It will allow people who are responsible civilly, who for one reason or the other either may not be available criminally or who may. It can go work both ways. Victims are not always interested in money. And if you look at the settlements, although they sound huge, many of the settlements garnered by victims are relatively minor, $15,000 or $20,000 for a lifetime of pain. I strongly object to Professor Miller, not the lawyer Miller, not the lawyer. The professor says, oh, put a cap or don't put monetary damages. You know, don't even pass the civil window, because what's the point? Although I would encourage, even if you did decide to put some kind of cap, which I don't agree with, that person will at least have the ability to show any person, family member, stranger, clergy person, teacher, scoutmaster, choir master, whoever, that they are responsible. And you can't claim Fifth Amendment privilege if the criminal prosecution has been barred by the statute of limitations. Remember, they're all forward-thinking. They're not retroactive. So, you know, once the criminal prosecution is barred, time barred, but you give a person a civil window, there's no claim of the statute of limitations. So therefore, the person is compelled to reveal what they already know. People don't forget about the fact that they raped little kids. They don't forget it. They will be forced to tell. And even if they claim, I don't remember, how can you say, I don't remember whether I raped this child or I didn't? So I think the civil aspect of it has its own unique place in our statutory scheme of things. And I have lobbied the Pennsylvania legislature, and since I'm in New York, might as well do the same thing here, as is obvious, and ask you and your fellow legislators to see the tremendous good that you'll be doing by giving victims a chance to tell the public what has happened to them. This is not only therapeutic to them, but exposes predators, whoever they may be, to the light of day for everything that they've done for most of their lives, and they can't ever be cured. A predator is a lifetime predator. You can't go to therapy and get better. All you can do is sublimate it. You'll always be a pervert.
Well, thank you for giving us a glimpse into what many thought was a very respected part of Pennsylvania or Philadelphia society in your state. And I'm sure you've given us even a glimpse as to what may be taking place in other churches, be they Protestant or Catholic.
Lutheran,
or
Jewish,
rabbis,
all of them.
and as well as other teachers. It doesn't really matter. And I know that you impaneled the grand jury from your testimony regarding the Catholic Church, but did your work...
Two grand juries.
Two grand juries. So did your work take you to other
We had
members of
intended
society?
to study a variety of religions for sexual predation, because we know it exists. It's not unique to the church. But we just ran out of resources. It was more than 5 years. It's still ongoing. I mean, the DA who, to follow me, the present DA of Philadelphia, is still using the materials that I had in my possession and the testimony that we received from the Cardinal and a variety of other people for future grand juries and present grand juries. So I think this is a long-term thing, but it certainly isn't unique. I do want to add one thought, because I didn't want you to misunderstand. The church is a wonderful institution, whatever church, but the Roman Church is a wonderful institution. I respect the church, and I respect good people in the church. I respect the religion. I respect the word of Jesus Christ and his disciples, although I'm not a Christian. It's the men. It's not the religion or the church. It's the men who run the church who have the problem, and it's the men who complain the most about what's happened. Don't blame the victims. Blame themselves. Get this out into the open. As Mr. Miller said, stop concealing this stuff. Get it out. Confess it all. And don't qualify your guilt by saying if, or if this happened, or if the church offended, we apologize. No, no, no. You have to get it all out there and confess it all. After all, that's what they ask their faithful to do, confess it all and be absolved.
Well, in the interest of full disclosure, Ms. Markey is a Roman Catholic. I'm a Roman Catholic.
Congratulations.
And
As I say, I was raised in a Roman Catholic family. I went to church like everybody else.
Well,
and I went to all Catholic schools.
Well, I'm a
and
public
never
school
abused.
person. Most kids in school aren't abused. They aren't. And there are many, many good priests, many of whom are my very, very close and dear friends. And I've been to Rome. I've been to see the Pope. I mean, I want to make sure that everybody doesn't think that I'm out to, quote, besmirch the church. This is as far from the truth as one can be. This is for victims and for anybody who abuses children.
And all we're asking is that they have their day in court.
That's
the
all I'm
bottom
I'm
line.
asking.
And we have talked about a cap, but we don't think that would be a good idea. I think would make it very difficult for victims to find an attorney to handle their case. Plus, I'm not an attorney, but I think an attorney will not handle a case if they don't think they have merit. There's no sense in just going into court, or an assistant district attorney going through the whole process if they don't feel that there's validity to this case. So I think that that's another way of protecting the system.
I would agree.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
your time.
Representative and
Very much.
Representative.
Thank you.
The next panel is Ken Peak, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center. Dr. John McDonough, licensed psychologist. Excuse me 1 second, I need a bathroom break.
When you come back, I'll go. Mr. Peak?
Yeah. Hi, that's Dr. Peak. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the Mount Sinai Adolescent Health Center. I want to thank you for having this opportunity. I was delighted when you asked us to speak, and I want to thank you for also having the courage to deal with an issue that, although it's widely reported in the press, very few people seem to want to deal with. I have brought a colleague with me just for the Q&A. Lily Davino runs our victim services and is an expert in terms of the treatment, and so in the event of questions around that, that's not my expertise. So, I'll depart a little bit from my prepared remarks because I think earlier panelists have talked about prevalence and some of the impacts. So I will move past that. Although I will note that it's widely thought that the rates of sexual abuse are probably between 25 and 35% among women, and less clear what they are among males. And one other little note, there was one population-based study that looked at US-wide by the Commonwealth Fund that was conducted in 1995, and they looked at 6,700 adolescents in grades 5 through 12. This study showed that 1 in 5 girls, 21%, and 1 in 8 boys reported experiencing either physical or sexual abuse. We think this study was relatively, massively underreporting simply because the way the questions were asked were pretty limited. And we know that from working with young people, if you ask them if they've been sexually abused, they're going to look at you strangely. But if you ask more specifically and graphically, you will get higher rates of reporting. The reason I'm mentioning this study, though, is that it was also interesting that of those who did disclose, only 27% of the girls reported ever seeing a mental health counselor. So